John 1:1. In propria venet, et sui eum non receperunt. He came into or to his own things, his own possessions. And his own, here, people, did not receive or accept him. This passage illustrates some interesting peculiarities of Latin usage in the Vulgate. But before we get there, let's talk about in propria, which actually very closely mirrors what we find in the Greek New Testament. Eis idia, into or toward or to his own things, his own possessions. Propria here is from the adjective proprius, and here it's being used as a substantive, which means it's acting like a noun. It doesn't need any noun to fulfill its sense. It itself can act as a noun. And we can parse it as neuter plural accusative following in. And remember, this is the usage of in plus accusative that we've talked about before, this motion into or toward a space. It's possible that this is also just more or less an equivalent for ad plus accusative. You can take your pick. Now, venet is the subject, and proprius always expresses those things which belong to the subject of the sentence. And we know the subject of the sentence is Christ from previous verses. But we have a different subject for our verb at the end of the sentence, sui. Our verb here, by the way, is third person plural, perfect, active, indicative, from the verb recipio, recipere, recipi, receptus, to receive or accept. Eum here is the accusative singular direct object from is, or third person pronoun, and it's referring to Christ. They did not receive him. So who did not receive him? Sui. English translations say quite rightly his own, referring back to Christ. This sui requires some explanation here, because typically our reflexive possessive adjective refers to the subject of the verb of the clause that it's in. So we should expect that sui receperunt means their own people did not receive him. That is, those people belonging to the people we're talking about in receperunt. That is, humanity generally. Humanity's own people did not receive him. But that's not what it means. Sui is actually referring back to Christ, the subject of the previous clause. So are we allowed to do that in Latin? Well, yes. In the Vulgate and also in classical Latin, it sometimes happens that suis is used this way. The classic example is Socratem hives sui interfecerunt. And this is a sentence that means his own fellow citizens killed or put to death Socrates. Socrates is the accusative direct object here. Now, what this really should mean grammatically, according to the rules you learn in a textbook, it should mean their own fellow citizens, that is, of those who did the killing, killed Socrates. But it doesn't. The sui refers back to Socrates, seemingly violating the grammatical rule. It's better to think of it as a common sense translation. While Socrates is not the subject of the sentence, he is the subject of the discourse. He's the person we've just been talking about. So evidently it made sense to native speakers and writers of Latin, even though this isn't strictly grammatically precise, to understand that sui was referring back to Socrates and did not refer to the subject of interfecerunt. The same thing is going on in our passage here in John. Sui eum non receperunt. Sui referring back to the subject of venet. His own people did not receive him.